The Life and Times of Idi Amin, From Humble Beginnings to Dictatorial Rule. Idi Amin, one of Africa's most notorious leaders, is a figure who evokes a complex blend of fascination and horror. His journey from humble beginnings to the pinnacle of power in Uganda, and eventually to his downfall and death, is a story replete with intrigue, brutality, and larger-than-life personality traits. In this video we are going to be looking into the life of Idi Amin, tracing his early years, rise to power, dictatorial rule, failures, and ultimate demise. Let's start from his humble beginnings. Idi Amin Dada was born around 1925 in Koboko, a small town in the northwest of Uganda, near the borders of Sudan and Congo. His exact birth date remains uncertain, reflecting the obscurity of his early life. Amin belonged to the Kokwa ethnic group, a minority in Uganda, which played a significant role in his identity and political maneuvering. Raised in a rural environment, Amin had limited access to formal education. He attended an Islamic school in Bombo, where he learned to read the Quran and developed a rudimentary understanding of English. His formal education, however, did not extend beyond a few years, leaving him largely uneducated, a fact that he would later both downplay and use to his advantage. Early military career and rise to prominence. The early stages of Idi Amin's military career were crucial in shaping his future as a ruler. After joining the King's African Rifles, KAR, in 1946, Amin quickly distinguished himself through his physical abilities and willingness to undertake dangerous assignments. His physical prowess, towering height, and imposing presence quickly set him apart. The military provided Amin with structure, discipline, and an avenue for social mobility that would have otherwise been inaccessible. During his time in the KAR, Amin served in various capacities, including as a cook and a private. His service in Burma during World War II and later in the suppression of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya provided him with valuable combat experience and a reputation for brutality. His brutal methods during this period earned him a reputation for ruthlessness, a trait that would come to define his later rule. His military acumen and loyalty to the new government were instrumental in his rapid promotion to major and then to commander of the Ugandan Army and Air Force. Amin's ascent in the military ranks continued as Uganda approached independence. His loyalty to the British colonial authorities and later to the Ugandan government was rewarded with rapid promotions. By 1959, he had achieved the rank of Effendi, an African warrant officer, a rare accomplishment for a black African in the colonial military hierarchy. By the time Uganda gained independence in 1962, Amin had achieved the rank of major and was well positioned within the newly formed Ugandan army. His close relationship with President Milton Obote became a pivotal factor in his rise to power. Obote viewed Amin as a reliable ally who could help him consolidate control over the military and suppress opposition. In 1966, during a crisis that saw Obote suspend the constitution and declare himself president with sweeping powers, Amin played a critical role in crushing dissent, particularly in the attack on the Buganda King's Palace. Idi Amin's rise to power. Uganda's post-independence period was marked by political instability, with power struggles between President Milton Obote and other political factions. Amin initially aligned himself with Obote, who viewed the military as a crucial support base. In 1966, Obote faced a crisis when he was implicated in a gold smuggling scandal and subsequently suspended the constitution, granting himself extensive powers. Amin played a key role in Obote's crackdown on dissent, particularly in the attack on the palace of the King of Buganda, a rival political figure. This act of loyalty solidified his position within the military and the ruling elite. However, tensions between Obote and Amin began to simmer as Obote grew increasingly wary of Amin's ambition and growing influence. By 1970, Obote had demoted Amin and sought to marginalize him within the military. Sensing the threat to his position, Amin orchestrated a coup on January 25, 1971, while Obote was attending a Commonwealth summit in Singapore. The coup was swift and bloodless, and Amin declared himself president, promising to restore democracy and eliminate corruption. Amin's dictatorial rule. Amin's initial promises of reform and stability quickly gave way to a reign of terror characterized by paranoia, brutality, and economic mismanagement. His rule, which lasted from 1971 to 1979, was marked by widespread human rights abuses, extrajudicial killings, and the expulsion of Asians from Uganda. Amin's consolidation of power involved the systematic elimination of perceived enemies, both real and imagined. He targeted Obote loyalists, intellectuals, journalists, and members of various ethnic groups. The notorious State Research Bureau, Amin's secret police, became synonymous with torture and murder. Estimates of those killed during his regime range from 100,000 to 500,000, with many bodies never found. Amin's leadership style was characterized by unpredictability and grandiosity. He declared himself president for life, field marshal, and conqueror of the British Empire among other titles. His eccentric behavior and outlandish statements, such as offering to become the King of Scotland, earned him international infamy and a reputation as the Butcher of Uganda. Consolidation of power and initial promises. When Amin seized power in the coup of January 1971, he initially presented himself as a liberator and a restorer of democracy. He promised to hold elections, release political prisoners, and eliminate corruption. These pledges were met with cautious optimism both domestically and internationally. Many Ugandans, weary of Obote's increasingly authoritarian rule, welcomed the change. However, Amin's true nature soon became apparent. His initial gestures of goodwill were quickly overshadowed by his desire to consolidate power and eliminate potential threats. He purged the military of Obote loyalists and other perceived enemies, often using brutal and extrajudicial methods. The establishment of the State Research Bureau, his secret police, marked the beginning of a reign of terror that would define his regime. Reign of terror and human rights abuses. Amin's rule was characterized by extreme paranoia and brutality. He saw enemies everywhere and was ruthless in his efforts to neutralize them. The State Research Bureau, along with other security agencies, conducted widespread arrests, torture, and executions. Bodies of victims were often dumped in the Nile River or left in public places as a grim warning to others. The scale of the atrocities committed during Amin's rule is difficult to quantify, but estimates suggest that between 100,000 and 500,000 people were killed. The victims included political opponents, members of rival ethnic groups, intellectuals, and professionals. Amin's targeting of specific ethnic communities, such as the Acholi and Longo, further deepened divisions within Ugandan society. The international community, initially ambivalent or supportive of Amin, began to turn against him as reports of human rights abuses mounted. His erratic behavior and grandiose proclamations, such as declaring himself the conqueror of the British Empire and offering to become the King of Scotland, added to his notoriety. Idi Amin's economic mismanagement. Amin's economic policies were disastrous for Uganda. In 1972, he ordered the expulsion of Uganda's Asian minority, accusing them of economic sabotage. This decision led to the exodus of over 70,000 Asians, many of whom were business owners and skilled professionals. The nationalization of foreign-owned businesses and industries further compounded the economic crisis. The expulsion crippled the economy, leading to shortages, inflation, and a decline in industrial and agricultural productivity. Shops, businesses, and industries were nationalized and handed over to Amin's cronies, who lacked the expertise to manage them effectively. The result was widespread corruption, mismanagement, and a collapse in productivity. Basic commodities became scarce, inflation soared, and the overall standard of living plummeted. Amin's attempts to realign Uganda's foreign relations also backfired. His alignment with Libya's Muammar Gaddafi and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, further isolated Uganda from Western powers and traditional allies. Economic aid and investment dwindled, exacerbating the country's economic woes. Internal dissent and international isolation. As Amin's rule became increasingly repressive, internal dissent grew. Discontent within the military, which had initially supported him, began to surface. Amin's reliance on loyalists from his own Kokwe ethnic group and other marginalized communities alienated other factions within the armed forces. Coupled with the economic collapse, this discontent set the stage for his eventual downfall. Amin's international isolation was also becoming more pronounced. His erratic behavior and human rights abuses had turned him into a pariah. In 1976, the Entebbe hostage crisis, where Israeli commandos rescued hostages held by pro-Palestinian terrorists at Entebbe airport, further tarnished his image. The incident exposed Amin's links to international terrorism and highlighted the extent of his regime's brutality. Subsequent failures and downfall. Amin's increasingly erratic behavior and disastrous policies alienated both his domestic and international supporters. His alliance with Libya's Muammar Gaddafi and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, isolated him from Western powers, who had initially been ambivalent about his regime. The breaking point came in 1978 when Amin ordered an invasion of Tanzania, claiming territorial disputes. This move proved to be a fatal miscalculation. The Tanzanian army, backed by Ugandan exiles, launched a counteroffensive that quickly overwhelmed Amin's poorly trained and demoralized forces. By April 1979, Amin's regime had collapsed, and he fled into exile, first to Libya and then to Saudi Arabia, where he lived until his death in 2003. Life in exile and death. In exile, Amin led a relatively quiet life, shielded from prosecution by the Saudi government. He was reportedly kept under surveillance and lived in relative obscurity in the port city of Jeddah. Despite repeated calls for his extradition to face justice for his crimes, Amin remained in Saudi Arabia until his death on August 16, 2003. Amin's legacy is one of brutality and failure. His regime left Uganda in economic ruin and inflicted deep psychological scars on its people. The atrocities committed under his rule have been documented in numerous accounts and continue to haunt the collective memory of Uganda. Yet, his story also serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the vulnerability of nascent democracies to authoritarianism. Idi Amin's legacy and lessons learned. The legacy of Idi Amin is one of horror and caution. His rule exemplifies the worst excesses of dictatorial power, characterized by extreme violence, paranoia, and economic mismanagement. The impact of his regime on Uganda was profound, leaving scars that are still felt today. However, Amin's story also offers important lessons. It underscores the need for robust institutions that can check the power of leaders and prevent the rise of autocratic regimes. It highlights the importance of international vigilance and intervention in the face of gross human rights abuses. And it serves as a stark reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of tyranny. In the years since Amin's downfall, Uganda has made significant strides in rebuilding its economy and political institutions. The country has faced numerous challenges, including continued political instability and human rights issues. But the lessons of Amin's rule have informed efforts to create a more just and democratic society. In conclusion, Idi Amin's journey from a rural village in Uganda to the presidential palace in Kampala, and finally to exile in Saudi Arabia, reflects both the opportunities and pitfalls of political power. As Uganda continues to rebuild and reconcile with its past, the lessons from Amin's era remain pertinent, underscoring the need for accountable leadership and the protection of civil liberties in the pursuit of national development and stability. And with that we have come to the end of this video. If you learned anything from this video, please give a thumbs up and share it with others. Also please subscribe to get notifications of new videos. Thank you.